Hello, this is Braden. This is for my second response for the discussion over the first half of the Moore's account. Over this response, I want to go into the relation of Mustafa being a merchant and how it's relevant to the story, and how it kind of affects certain parts of the story. It kind of makes some stuff matter more. He has a additional layer that is on top of it that would have not been known otherwise had he not been a merchant previously. I'm going to kind of start talking about it. I'm going to include a couple passages that I thought were slightly interesting that have to do with it. The first passage I want to include is it's in the chapter 4, the story of Azamor, and it is the portion when Mustafa tells his father he wants to go into the merchandising business, and his father gives him the information and helps him meet up with some people he knows, the Al-Dib family, and they assist him in selling and learning how to sell. They teach him all kinds of stuff. He becomes a very well-to-do merchant. And after this portion where it first introduces him, it goes through all of what he learns. Then it goes, the commerce of flesh came to tempt me one spring morning. And this is big because from before this, we've only known him as a slave. And this is when we learn, how he once also sold slaves. And he goes into how he was buying grain from a man who offered to sell him a couple slaves that he did not want for only 75. Let me get the correct. Yes, the farmer spoke again. How about it? 75 for all three. And that was when Mustafa stopped praising the wheat, and he started haggling with him. And he said 60, and the man sold it. Sold the slaves to him, and Mustafa was temporarily an owner of slaves. And then he sold the slaves later and made a profit of 150 reyes. So the men, this is something that you can keep in mind. He bought 3 men for 20 each, then sold them for around, I'm going to say 70-ish each. So he made quite a bit of profit. Later in the story, let me find the portion very quick. When he is sold off as a slave, let me find it. Sorry. Slave. But when he's sold off as a slave, he is sold for only, I want to say, $20 or so dollars. And, it's during that time, there's a lot more people who were sold as slaves. And due to this, the inflation of it is not very, it's not good that there's so many slaves that there's inflation. But during this horrific time in Spain, the wheat had all dried up. There's no money. All of the money they once had, it's gone. They go into how, luckily, that he knew how to sell most stuff. And I found the portion. And, before he sells himself, he kind of goes into how he's having to go through all of his family belongings. They're selling all they can. He uses his experience as a merchant, to help them do so. And later on, when he's selling himself, he meets one of his one of his friends, and he's like, he knows he knows everything about what they're selling, but he just doesn't have the birthright that they do. They're Portuguese, and he's, lesser. They think of him as lesser, so they don't give him the opportunity to sell. And he goes up, and he knows what he's worth, or he thinks he does, and he has to haggle with them. And he initially asks for 20, and then he goes, "No, I'm not going to give you 20, 11." And they eventually haggle to 16. And he uses his once powerful skills as a merchant to help his parents out even more in the hard times. And this in the story itself, multiple times that I don't want to go too long and mention all of them, but his skills as a merchant come to play. He realizes, partly the part of him selling the slaves to the other merchant, previously the three, he mentions that when he goes to feed the tortured Indians food, he mentions how he still feels horrible about that. And he kind of got lost as a merchant in the greed of it all. And that shows some significant character. It shows he's changed over time. He's not focused on money as he was then when he became a merchant. And he also, it kind of says he partly did it initially too because he wanted to make his father happy. Because a merchant's a lot better than just a street person who just is doing stuff on the street for the suit, and he wants to work in the suit. So it's kind of like a evening out of the desires versus reality.